Oh, cool. So cool. I love it.
Yeah, I've just been, out noticing all the really ugly signs out and about. So good luck to those people with those really ugly signs.
What are the odds of setting this up after the 7th?
I think I'm being blackballed, actually, to be honest with you. It's been 3 weeks since I worked.
When do you want to set up?
So I think it might be a little bit of a blackball issue. That's okay, we don't need yard signs to win.
Well, you might be sick.
More short on seating. We got the bench. We got the bench.
It's kind of irritating. Keep working on it.
This is a backup camera. That's a streaming camera.
Last few days. Should be
We're streaming live to Facebook right now.
Get out there.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. So we're missing Mark. There she is.
I'm always like,
Beer. I need a beer. So, some quick logistics. If you want a beer, go grab a beer. There's a lot of beer here. Restrooms are through that door and to the left. And I think we're okay on seating. Are we all right? Is everybody able to get a seat? We still have some bench space. Great. So it looks like we picked just the right size room. My name is Scott Converse, and I am the co-founder of the Longmont Observer with Sergio Angelis. Did you have something you were going to say? Okay. And the Longmont Observer is a nonprofit, nonpartisan local news entity. It's been around for about 6 months now, and we started it when the Times Call moved out of Longmont, because frankly it pissed us off. So it seemed to us like a good idea to have a local news source that was made and run by people who live in your city, live in that city. So that's what the Longmont Observer is. So tonight what we're doing is we're streaming live to Facebook and recording this. It'll also go up on YouTube.
You might want to adjust. Your head might be cut
I want
off.
to do that for you. Oh, I'm going to be sitting.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Am I
All right,
okay?
you're good then.
Okay.
Now you're up ahead.
This one's fine though,
Okay.
which is the live one, the one that matters.
Okay.
So this is the backup camera.
Okay.
So, all right.
So you can tell when you're going backwards?
Yeah. So we have, I don't know if anybody didn't get any questions in. We've got substantially more questions than we're going to be able to get through tonight. So we'll pick as many as we can that are relevant to current things that are going on, specifically things that you're seeing being discussed now that are being voted on during the next election, and issues that have shown up in the media over the last year. So with that said, the rules are as follows. These are the questions. We set this up so that everybody's going to have, both of these guys are going to have 3 minutes to do an opening statement. And then what we'll do is we're going to flip a coin, pick out who's A and who's B. So basically who goes first, who goes second. When a question is asked, the first candidate will get 3 to 5 minutes to respond. The second candidate will then be able to get 3 to 5 minutes to respond to the question. If either of them talk about the other person and what they said, the other person has the right to rebuttal. And that rebuttal can be 2 minutes, 3 minutes for the first rebuttal, and then if they go after the other person gets 2 minutes to have a rebuttal, and that happens twice, and then they have to stop. So, because you guys have seen this, you know how it works. We have a timekeeper over here. So what's going to happen is, hold up to 1 minute, hold up to 30 seconds, and you guys need to pay attention to that, because I will cut you off if you're going past your time, and they are going to be timing these questions. So right now, of course, I don't have a coin. So, does anybody have a coin? Do you have a coin? There's an app for that. So, we're going to make heads and tails.
what do you want, a dime, a quarter?
Whatever works for you. Quarter, that's good. Yes. All right, so I'm going to make, you want to be heads or tails? You don't care?
I'll be heads.
You want to be heads? All right. And it is tails. There's proof right there. So Jeff goes first. He's candidate. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. So, Jeff, do you want to open up with your opening statement?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jeff Moore, and I'm your current Ward 2 City Council member. I was elected in 2013, and I'm running for re-election. I'm asking for your vote. My wife Ingrid and I moved to Longmont in 1995, and have grown to love this city. Now retired from my engineering profession, I have the time to give back to our community. I want to continue to work to make our city the best place to live along the Front Range. My campaign slogan is creating tomorrow today. It is my guiding principle. I believe that the decisions we make today set the stage for generations to come and for the future of Longmont. Policies set by council are a responsibility that should not be taken lightly. My votes on council have reflected that what I believe is best for Longmont, weighing all sources of input and the impacts to the community. My votes are not based on my personal or partisan positions. I want to continue to move Longmont forward as your council representative. My experience and qualifications from my first term on council give me a solid base to continue serving as your representative. I currently serve on several boards, and locally I've been involved with affordable housing, economic development, and infrastructure. Regionally, I've participated in transportation issues on behalf of Longmont. I'm serving on the National League of Cities Board of Directors, advocating for important issues for cities like Longmont at a national level. From the countless hours spent with these groups, I've gained a broad perspective that I can put to use immediately. There's still so much to accomplish in my next term on council. The Resilient St. Parain project, our new transit-oriented development at First and Kaufman, our workforce housing, infrastructure for transportation, energy, and water. Other city services are issues that were started during my first term as well. The quality of life experience in Longmont did not happen by accident. Our predecessors had the foresight and the courage to support a robust infrastructure that includes an electrical utility, water resources, and transportation. Our most recent infrastructure project, NextLight, is the fastest internet provider in the nation. Council needs to continue this tradition of providing for the future. We are literally creating tomorrow today. I'm putting myself forward as the clear choice for your nonpartisan, thoughtful representative for the future of Longmont. I humbly ask for your vote.
Great.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm happy to be here, and I especially thank the Longmont Observer for existing and for setting this up, and for Open Door Brewery for hosting this event. I'm running for Longmont City Council because I love Longmont. It's my chosen home, and I think it's coming to a crossroads. The existing council majority has us in the wrong lane. That majority has turned conservative, and that's not what we voted to elect. Now we need to change lanes and get back on the right track. Here's the problem. The conservative majority on council reacts when it should plan, or it reacts to catch up when it's too late to plan. This leads to wrong decisions. Consider. On South Side traffic, by accepting developers' traffic studies rather than using simulations to develop its own, the city has subjected residents of our ward to unreasonable and unnecessary congestion. When I asked why, I got the worst possible answer. It's the process. Well, processes can change, and this one should. On oil and gas development. Last winter, when Lafayette City Council was considering its Climate Bill of Rights for the first time, I spoke and urged the Longmont City Council to take up the same model ordinance. After that session, one council member announced that he is tired of hearing about fracking. In his view, Longmont lost that battle when the Colorado Supreme Court overturned our ban. Now council has lost almost a year when it could have been finding novel ways to impede fracking. I'm not tired. I want our community to be safe, and I won't lose focus on future threats, on affordable housing. Council's conservative majority believes the market will take care of Longmont's housing shortage and price disparities. I can show evidence that Boulder, Louisville, Lafayette, and Longmont comprise a single market. There is tremendous upward pressure on housing prices in Lafayette and Longmont. Longmont seriously lags the other municipalities in Boulder County in its plans for providing affordable housing in the face of this market pressure. Part of the problem is the conservative majority's reluctance to apply regulatory pressure to oppose market forces, even to protect Longmont's economic diversity, its needier residents, and its precious culture of inclusion. When elected to Longmont City Council, I pledge to look to the future. I'll be a new broom. I will do what's right, not what's easy. I will fight for our city and champion equal opportunity and equal protection for all the Longmont community. Thank you.
All right, so we got a bunch of questions. I'll tell you my favorite one you guys asked, but I'm not going to ask them. Do you like puppies and kittens, and would you like some new recipes? So, that's good. All right, so we're going to start with Jeff, and then we'll go to Marcia, and back and forth as appropriate. Here's the first question. What can Longmont do to attract more startups as well as established businesses to base themselves in Longmont? Jeff?
All right, well, there already is a culture of entrepreneurship in Longmont, and to foster that, we could continue to make sure that we're involving our economic development partners and our city council together to work towards providing for things like space for entrepreneurs to work, for advertising. It's like we're having a good run with groups like Tinkermill, and providing for entrepreneurs is going to be something that I think we're going to get some spillover from Boulder because of the costs that are starting to go there. Getting entrepreneurs in Longmont will provide economic development as well as more employment. So working towards that goal would be something that we have to bring to council that really hasn't been addressed very well so far.
Ready for me? All right, well, I would like to point out that there are 3 co-working environments in Longmont today. A new one opened up on Main Street just this week, in addition to Colsolve and Tinkermill. I went to Colsolve's hosted coffee this week, and the variety and talents of people on display there were so good that I was really tempted to found a startup. But I decided I was busy this year, so I didn't. But seriously, you know, Longmont and Boulder together are the 2 most highly educated, most talented, most patent-dense communities on the Front Range. And if we could get back and forth more easily to the businesses that are established in Denver, it would open up a tremendous, tremendous market and advantage both communities hugely. And I think what we need to do is get our high volume, high speed, high frequency public transportation back on track. And I guess I better not say any more than that. I had a couple other points, but you guys just told me when to quit. Okay.
All right.
I don't think either of us needs a rebuttal. I didn't talk about his stuff.
You guys were general. Next question. This one came up a lot. What is your position on the Windy Gap Water Project and the related water rate hikes?
That's me first this time, right? Well, that's a question that I would have been better in rebuttal on, but here's the deal. There are two arguments coming from the opposite side of this question, and I'll take at least the first minute to talk about the obvious argument. Some people in Longmont, more people than you would know, live so close to the edge that $1 or $2 on their water bill is going to be the difference between their getting to the end of the month with change in their pocket and not. One of those people is a dear friend of mine who took care of my mother during her final decline. I would not let anything happen to her, but she is proud and she does not want me to pay her water bills. And she doesn't want me to have to take her in when they sell off her trailer park either. So that's the obvious argument, and I will tell you that a newspaper reporter that interviewed me today told me a story about when he was interviewing somebody else before me, another candidate, not in this particular race, and he said that there was a man sitting next to him overhearing their conversation, and that man said, "Excuse me for eavesdropping, but I just have to break in. When they raise our water rates, I am not going to be able to make it, and I'm not voting for this measure." So that's one argument. That argument doesn't speak to me directly, but the other one really does. When I was growing up, there was a project called Frying Pan, Arkansas, and it was near my hometown of Pueblo. And I will tell you that Frying Pan, Arkansas was a great thing for Pueblo, and it was a great thing for La Junta and Lamar, where I had relatives, all the towns on the south of the Eastern Plains. And everybody was excited about Frying Pan, Arkansas. And it was great. It even improved the climate of Pueblo because we could use a little extra humidity, and that was a big lake they've got down there because it was meant not just to firm the water supply for a city, but it was meant to enable the agriculture of Lamar and La Junta and Rocky Ford, and it did that, and it was a great thing. But it took water from the western slope, and the western slope could spare it back then, but I'm not sure western slope thinks that it made a good bargain today. I don't know what they think about it, but I don't know if they think they made a good bargain today. Well, the NIST water project is another thing like that. It's taking water out of the Colorado River sources, and it's taken more than 20 years to get that project approved and going, and now it finally is, and Windy Gap is an outgrowth of that. And with facing all of the uncertainty about climate that we're facing today, I don't want to live in the town that took more than its share. No, I don't. I want water in the Colorado River. I want there to be fish in the Colorado River. I don't want to lose the Colorado River in 20 years when the climate changes even more. I don't want that to happen. And so I'll tell you, I don't think I want to be in Longmont when the backlash comes and say, yeah, that Longmont is a water hoarder. That Longmont is the reason the Colorado River is dry. I not only want to build a firming project for 6,000 acre feet of water, if we even need that after we apply the effects of conservation, xeriscaping, and everything we can do in the city to use less water. But I want to see if it's a possible way to take the other 4,000 acre feet and put them back in the damn Colorado River. So that's what I think.
Well, I am supporting the Windy Gap ballot question to Jay for several reasons. One of the things is we have a $56 million investment sitting on the western slope right now. We need to be able to take advantage of that and store some of that water. even though we own the 80 shares we originally started with, 80 units, I guess they're called, we're not going to be utilizing all 80 units in the firming project. When you talk about taking water from the Colorado, it's already happening, it will continue to happen, and whether or not we take that water at 10,000 acre feet, someone else will. Anything we don't take, someone else will take that. That water is out of the Colorado. This has been a project that's been going on, as Marcia said, for 20 years to get the permits going. It actually started back in the 70s. So by the time we get the diversion project built and paid off this year, we're going to be ready to move that water into a permanent storage facility and have 4,000 acre feet available for consumption on the eastern slope that can benefit Longmont with a clean, reliable source of water for our existing water treatment plant. There are a lot of other reasons, one of them being that as long as we keep a bond on the Windy Gap project, we can charge a surcharge to do development so that anybody coming to Longmont can continue to help pay for our new development, which is one of the complaints I hear quite often is that development isn't paying for itself. Well, it may never 100% pay for itself, but at least we get our water supply paid for. The other side of that is I hear about the rates, and I understand that it's going to impact some people a lot. It's $1.32 in 2018 and $2.12 in 2019, and that's in addition to the water rate increases we have already that we're currently replacing aging infrastructure. Not having water rates go up is not something that's we are going to continue to raise water rates because we do have aging infrastructure and we will have need for more water. The 10,000 acre feet and the 4,000 acre feet yield should be controlled by Longmont. We don't want another entity along the Front Range that could take that water and use it for the purposes that we don't necessarily agree with. We hear about using that water for fracking. Well, I would only use any excess water we have in Longmont for irrigation, or if another entity in another city has a crisis in their water supply, that we could help them out. That's the only way I would advocate using any excess water we have. Climate change is a reality in my view. We have disruptions in the weather systems that are now causing unpredictability. Where the snow is going to fall is really going to be the big question. Doug Kenny, the director of the Western Policy Program at the University of Colorado, and I'm quoting here, all the operating guidelines you built up based on data from the last century just don't work well anymore. It's from the High Country News in August 2017. And he's referring to shifting weather patterns, greater extremes, wetter wet years, drier dry years. We need to be preparing for that as a city. Nefarious uses that we don't agree with, that I don't agree with, are something that we need to be aware of and take care of in the future. I would support a charter amendment for the leasing of water to oil and gas and limit any future excess water use to agriculture and municipal use for emergency uses only, not supply water permanently to cities.
All right.
Rebuttal, please.
Yes, are you ready for the rebuttal? 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay. I am glad that my opponent has thought of more progressive ways to pay for the project. I would like to point out that that means he expects this fall for the current ballot issue to be voted down, because that's the only circumstance under which the pay for is going to get changed, if I understand correctly. So that's not exactly a rebuttal, but I did want to point that out to everybody. And for the rest of it, I would just like to say that we are not Longmont the island. when it comes to something as massive as climate change. The southwestern United States is in this together. The Rocky Mountain region is in this together. And if we don't come to a way where we can be cooperative and work together to make sure that everything we have to keep going keeps going, if we have an extended drought, then we're going to have water wars. We're going to have refugees from the coasts, and then we're going to have water wars. We need to do a better job of being civilized people than just grabbing everything we can get before things get bad. That's all. That's all.
Well, yeah, I think that just want to point out that the way that we keep that surcharge and the way we help have development help pay for future water usage is to pass this bond issue, because that's part of it. The water rates will be extended into the future, 20 years out, 30 years out, and if you move to Longmont in 20 years, you're going to be helping to pay for that. If you buy a house that's built 20 years from now, your house will have a surcharge attached to it to help pay for that infrastructure that's been developed over the last 150 years. So I think that that in itself is a major consideration to make sure that we continue the Windy Gap bonding. As far as refugees, that's a concern of mine as well. If it dries up to the point where there's not enough water in other parts of the country, we may need more water than we even think we need as people move into Longmont, and our population booms to even higher levels than we're projecting today, which is a real possibility, because all of the assumptions that we have today are based on assumptions, right? What are assumptions good for? Probably till tomorrow. You can make sure that even though right now we're saying 120,000, back in 2012 it was 104,000. What's it going to be in 2032? It could be 150,000. We don't know. And we have to prepare and be ready for any possibility. Otherwise, we are not good stewards.
2 minutes?
Yep. I think there's something I would like to say about the $9 increases in water rates and the aging infrastructure. I said in my opening statement that what we have right now is a reactive council and not a forward-looking council. And I think that that $9 increase is a terrible hardship on the people, and it's an example of that. Because what could have happened is that there could have been a rolling replacement of the water infrastructure over time that would have raised rates a little bit at a time, and then we wouldn't have had to raise the rates by $9. Shouldn't have kicked the can down the road quite so far. Mr. Bagley agrees with me. I'm glad to hear it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Previous councils dropped the ball.
Right. So.
Yeah, well, the 9% is going to replacing infrastructure that is aging. And if we don't do that, we could have complete system failure. We could be without water in certain parts of the city. Is that what people want? Looking backwards and blaming past councils isn't going to help the situation. We need to be proactive and make sure that we get to this repair and this infrastructure replacement before we have failures. We can't wait till it fails or it's too late.
Second 2 minute and last rebuttal.
Oh,
If you
no,
want
I'm
it.
not.
If you want it.
Yeah.
If you want it.
It is not to say that we can go back in time and replace that, but I think it's an important point that we should have, and people on both sides of the question agree that we should have. And that's why I'm running for council, because I am a forward-looking person. I've been a forward-looking person, a futurist my entire career, and I want to apply that mindset to not making the same mistakes that were made in the past in the future. That's it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why we're in the situation we're in, is that we didn't take care of it when we should have, or could have, had smaller rate increases. We are now in a situation, though, that looking back isn't helping. It's costing more today than it would have yesterday. It's going to cost more tomorrow than it's costing today. It's just the fact of inflationary pressures on materials and labor. If we don't start now, the bill's going to be even bigger. And if we don't continue to work together and look forward, I think that we have anything like water infrastructure or sewer infrastructure is a ticking time bomb if we don't take care of it now. And there are stories around the country today where wooden pipelines are failing big time. And there are cities that are being, their water supply is not adequate for what the needs are. And we need to make sure that we look into that and don't actually create a bigger situation than we've already got. And in order to do that, we have to understand as a council and listen, learn, and make sure that we are proactively managing our infrastructure and make sure that we have that available for our future residents. We're not building this for 20 years from now. We're building this for 50, 75, 100 years from now. The age of this infrastructure is at a critical point where it isn't failing yet, but we have to make sure that we don't let it get to that point. I think if you look at Denver as a prime example, they have almost daily water main breaks, and we don't want to be there.
All right, next question. Another easy one. What is your position on raising sales tax 25 cents for every $100 spent to fund more police and fire resources? I believe that's yours.
Well, sales taxes in general, nobody likes taxes, right? Our public safety tax increase request is about funding our police, fire, and communications systems. Our city has grown 10%, and during that same period, we've not added any police officers. Think about that. We still have one of the safest cities around, but are we going to stay that way if we don't fund our police departments adequately? We're sending a single officer to a 2-officer call. That's a safety issue. We have an investment in every police officer we have. It takes a year and a half, 2 years before they're actually fully functional on the street. We can't let them leave because they're not getting enough support within our own system. We have to make sure that we're going to have a safe community. It includes police, it includes fire, it includes 911 dispatchers. We have some of the most stressful positions in the market. You know, if you think about who has to go out on calls, who has to answer the phone and listen to that person on the other end of the 911 call. How stressful is that? We can't push these people any harder. We need to make sure that we can provide the services, keep people safe, and it just takes more resources to do that. One of the things that's come up, I mean, they had some positions that I disagreed with. And I've been talking with the city manager about that. You know, do we need an armorer? Someone that hands out weapons and takes care of it. I'm not sure that our police department's that big. I can't remember exactly what the other position was, but it turned around, and at the last council meeting, they came to us and said, well, we've eliminated a couple positions, but we're going to replace them with body camera technicians. So we're moving towards body camera technology, and we've waited until the technology was the one we wanted to use. Boulder made some mistakes. They're on their second system. We can learn from that, and we can make our officers safer. We can provide better evidence for trials. We can provide better protection for our police officers. It costs money. Those two positions are going to be added to our staffing. Our detectives is another place where we don't have enough staffing. It's taking too long. When you have a court case, it takes a detective 40 to 60 hours of their time in order to go to court, testify, collect all the evidence, process it, put it in a position, get it to the DA. We need more public safety funding, and that's so that we can make sure that our community is safe and it prospers.
Not going to get any argument from me on that. I urge everybody to vote for this tax. It makes sense. It was done timely. It just keeps the proportion of staff, safety staff to population on an even keel. That's going to have to be done every so often in a growing city. I have a story about that though. Monday I went to my homeowners association meeting because you know I'm running for office and you go places like that where influencers are. And lo and behold, my neighbor was there, my next door neighbor. She works at the university and commutes into Denver. And we were talking, I gave her a lift home. She'd walked over to the property management company because it was pretty close and I probably should have walked over too, but it was going to be dark when I got done. And we were getting along pretty well and she liked what I had to say in there, and on the ride home she asked me if she could have a yard sign. So I said, sure, they're in the trunk of my car. Here's a yard sign when I dropped her off at her house. And she didn't put it up, she took it into the house. And the next thing I knew, I was catching up with my email, and there was an email through my website from my neighbor. And she said, you know, Marcia, I'd like to understand your opinion on this safety tax. So I wrote back and I said to her just exactly what I told you. And the next morning the yard sign was out there, because what I had forgotten was that her husband was a policeman. So that's my story.
Take it, no rebuttal. Next question. Yeah, thank you. This is related. Does Longmont need a SWAT team and military equipment to do its job? Marcia?
No. I'd be appalled to see that happen. Don't do that. I'm done. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, the SWAT team we do have has been called out in several incidents. I have reservations. Militarizing police departments has been the trend across the country as excess military equipment comes on the market. They've been donated to cities. I think a lot of it has, if there is real need for it, I can't say that there is, but at the same time, if we don't have it and we need it, what are we going to do? They've been called out several times for incidents where I'm glad we had it. When we don't think about what could happen and don't prepare for it, then we're going to be caught short. And while I have reservations, I think that we do need a SWAT team.
I'd like a rebuttal.
All right, 3-minute rebuttal.
One of the reasons that I didn't get active in local politics before was that my last job pre-retirement involved aero commuting to St. Louis, Missouri. I was a smart grid engineer, and they were a smart grid company, and they were headquartered in St. Louis. And it was supposed to be a low travel job, but it turned out that I was at headquarters every week. And one Monday evening, as I was on the airport shuttle bus to get my rental car, we were driving one on the frontage road to Interstate 70, and we could see from the bus that there was a whole line of police cars with their lights on. And they weren't going fast, but they all had their lights on, and they were headed north. And we couldn't see either end of that train of police cars. And nobody could figure out what it was. We hadn't heard any news because we'd just come off the plane. Well, what it was Ferguson. The Ferguson riots were in progress, and every city and county and suburban municipality of St. Louis was sending all their police cars and all their equipment to go up there and frankly make things worse. And the reason I don't want militarization of police departments is because if you've got fancy equipment, somebody's going to think up some reason to play with it. So if we've got a little SWAT team, that's fine. You can keep it. But let's not take any more of that stuff. We are not a police state, and we don't need it.
Jeff, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I would agree. We don't want to be a police state. It's not, doesn't make people feel safe. I mean, if we have that impression of being a police state, people will stay in their homes, they'll lock their doors, they won't go out. Having a SWAT team is something also I think that makes the police officers themselves feel safer. I know that there have been people that have they've been maybe saved because we had a SWAT team. They've been secured from a situation that was difficult. They've been in a situation where it would have been very unwieldy for a standard uniformed officer to deal with it. Luckily, we don't have a riot situation. I haven't had one in a long time in Longmont. And I would hope that we don't get there, but we don't need a huge SWAT team, but I believe that, there's a lot of regional cooperation on using that SWAT team too, so it's not like every single small town along the Front Range has one. We share resources. We make sure that we need to make sure they're used wisely and not overused. And because if people get the impression we're a police state, they're either going to leave or they're going to lock the doors.
Any rebuttal? Next question. Let's take one from the audience. How do you reconcile an imperative for growth with a desire to limit Longmont's size? Marcia?
That's actually a main point of mine. See, what I think is going on is that Longmont has the Longmont City Council, or the conservative majority of the Longmont City Council, has an antiquated idea that we need to create incentives for developers to come in and build houses in Longmont. And that's not the way it works anymore. And the idea that the invisible hand of the market is going to correct the imbalances that we have in Longmont about not enough affordable housing and too much traffic on the south side. How many people in here have experienced not being able to get out of your subdivision because there's so much traffic on Pike Road?
Right.
Okay, yeah, you have, right? And you know why that happens? I'll talk about the transportation, the public transportation reason if that question comes around. But the urban planning reason is that Longmont accepts the traffic studies of developers when they're approving a new development. And does that make sense? What developer is going to say, oh yeah, and the city's going to have to build me a a road, or it's going to have to widen Plateau and put a light at that place where it squiggles, because we're going to have to divert traffic down to there and make all the people that live on Plateau Road facing it really angry, by the way. And they are. I've heard it from every house along that road. I've heard it. So the thing is, we need to have controlled growth. Longmont needs to use all its bargaining. We need zoning, we need annexation. We don't need subsidies because they're fighting to come here. This is the cheapest place to build left in Boulder County, and Boulder County is a diamond mine. Everybody wants to build in Longmont. What we need to do is have a vision for how we're going to make Longmont a great city. And a great city does not have concrete paving malls. A great city has walkable malls with experiential shopping so that people come and gather there and stay there and walk and buy things that you can't buy over the internet because you want to touch them or smell them or, you know, whatever it is, experience it, not just eat plastic cheeseburgers, you know. We need that kind of urban planning, and we're not doing it now. Instead, what we're doing is giving away the store with people to get somebody to build here. And if they're not going to build here, the next one will. And again, it's not looking far enough into the future. Longmont let the old Twin Peaks Mall fall to pieces for too long, and then took the first bid that came along and put money into it because it had been left too late. I'm not blaming anybody in this room for it. You know, if some of you are to blame, you know who you are. But we shouldn't have done it that way. We should have had good requirements. We should have had an idea of what the city needed. We should have made it an asset instead of just something a little less ugly than the buildings were falling down. The way it's designed now, it's creating a ring blight around the edge of it. So we're going to have to go in and fix something more. Only what has the city got to mortgage this time? Right? So look forward. Have a clear vision of where we're going. And don't trust the market, because the market will equalize housing in Longmont with housing in Boulder. It'll do the same thing to Lafayette. It's already practically done the same thing to Louisville. We don't want that to happen to Boulder County. We want Longmont to stay the kind of diverse community it is, and that means that we have to provide for everybody who lives here now.
Okay, I think the question was around growth and how we can limit the size of Longmont.
I agree again. How do you reconcile an imperative for growth with a desire to limit Longmont's size?
Well, just as far as if we just say size, we have growth boundaries already in place. We can't go outside of. They're determined by DRCOG. We have a land planning area, and we have open space, even encircling that. So, as far as the footprint of Longmont, is pretty much set to where it's going to be. There's more land to annex within that growth boundary, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we don't just greenfield develop everything without some redevelopment occurring. The incentives we've provided for redevelopment are the only ones we provide. We don't provide the incentives for new growth, for new development. So let's make that clear. We have the, what do you call it? Let the mall fall apart. Well, Longmont doesn't own the mall. Longmont doesn't own the property. It did not buy it. Somebody that did buy it wanted to redevelop it. And we worked out a deal which At the time that I came on council, it was pretty far down the road. There was really no stopping it at that point. Like I say, we don't place blame, but at the same time, that property is now performing. It's providing sales tax we didn't have before. It's providing payments for the COPs that we didn't have, that we participated in order to finance our portion of the village at the peaks. And with activity at that place, we're going to see more redevelopment around the mall, around the village, I should say. It's not the mall anymore. We need to stop calling it that. Although I don't really spend a lot of time there myself. There are a lot of people that go there. It's great to have a movie theater again. It's great to have a variety of restaurants. It's great that we are in a situation where we can actually took that blighted property and made it useful. While we may not have gotten everything we wanted out of the deal as far as opportunities for shopping, we really don't make that call. That's people that want to come into that market. We have moved a lot of our retail to downtown. Downtown is thriving. It's becoming the place to be. It's becoming a happening place. And I think if we continue to create an environment in Longmont where things are vibrant and happening and keeping things going forward, we will be better off in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the next time that Longmont has to make a payment out of the general fund to keep that mall, village, whatever it is, going, then maybe we can do some negotiation about improvements that need to take place, what goes in, instead of the failing businesses. Maybe we should put some constraints on that so that we don't have 6 plastic hamburger places there. It'd be nice to have something that wasn't a restaurant. And then the other thing that I'd like to say is it wasn't necessary to take that bid, and it is possible for the city to place requirements on a developer when there is some concession to the developer from Longmont. And we could have done a traffic study. We could have done a pedestrian study. We could have put constraints on what kind of development would go there that would encourage the kind of pedestrian traffic that we wanted to see. We could have had something that created community in Longmont instead of just a parking lot that is never full. I don't like parking lots that are never full. They're hot. I have to walk across them to get, from the Burger Doodle to the Verizon store, which is about the only 2 places I could ever go there. And there is no sense in building something like that in this day and age, because mundane shopping, except for food, and even now, food, is done by Amazon. So, put something interesting there. Put something put something that's good for people. Put something that encourages people to get together. Put something that encourages people to stick around. Don't have 50 instances of bad food. That's not good for any community.
Well, I tell you, we've had a lot of discussion about this, but we don't determine what goes in the mall or into the village. That is determined by the developer and by people that want to come in there. They have been turning down requests to develop the last few pad sites because they're not matching the vision that they have for that property. What we have today is much, much, much more than we had before. It's performing sales tax wise, it's performing property tax wise. In fact, I believe that they are actually have seen such a property tax increase that they're actually appealing that to the county. That's going to be good for the city of Longmont overall and everybody that lives here. Before we had nothing, now we have a performing facility that's paying for itself and generating excess revenue. That was the original intent of that project, and that's what we're getting. To say that we are creating a plastic burger place, well, that's not necessarily what we're going to end up with. We have to make sure that we end up with a performing shopping center that pays for itself, pays for its COPs, provides extra revenue, and ends up with a better Longmont for it. Now, because we're generating activity there, that'll spin out into other parts of the city. One of the good things they did at the shopping center was to create public spaces. You can go there in the summer for concerts. You can go there and you can have, you can meet somebody there, and you have a place to sit down. There's a fire pit. It is more of a place for people to gather than it is if it were just a plain old shopping center. So let's just think about what we're actually getting out of that project. Rather than curse it, let's support it. Let's make sure that we end up with where we need to be, and end up with a project that's going to perform and going to keep us in revenue, improve Longmont. And as time changes, it'll have to evolve, just like everybody, everything, and everyone. So let's keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 minutes?
I hope that if I shepherd a project through Longmont City Council with the new group of people that are going to be elected this fall, that we will have a stronger claim than that to make about our projects. But what Jeff said was really important. If you listen to the words he said, trust the invisible hand of the market. We'll make adjustments as we go along, and we'll eventually get something that we like. I think we could have done better than that. There were a few examples already in place in the greater Denver, northern Colorado area, beautiful examples of outdoor pedestrian malls. There's one, the Orchards at 144th and I-25. There's 29th Street in Boulder. Much, much better mall reconstruction projects than what we had. And that could absolutely have been handled have it been insured by direction provided by the City Council, or plans that the City Council directed their staff to make. Could have been directed to look and see what was beneficial about those. Could have been directed to write requirements that made sure that anybody who got the concessions that these people did had to meet in order to get the development deal. We could have done that, and the next time we should. We should look forward, we should look for what the city needs, and we should have a vision that we're building to. Because we don't have time to waste.
The fact of the matter is, economic development revolves around development as well as bringing in new ideas. This shopping center is more of a lifestyle center, not more of a lifestyle center than a shopping center, but it includes a lifestyle component. And I think that that's what Marcia was referring to when she was comparing this site to others. Every site's unique. Every developer has their own vision of what they want to build. We have very limited capacity as a city to tell a developer what to do in their own property. This is like telling somebody to come on your front yard and say, well, you can't mow your yard anymore because we don't allow it. That's not the way it works. The market drives what comes into those situations, and we have to make sure that we keep pushing forward and require that the developer continue to provide the revenues from sales tax, property tax in order to support the project. If we don't do that, that's really our role as a city, and making sure that we are holding his feet to the fire and make sure that we are actually getting the revenue that we deserve. We're an investor in this project, and our payback is the revenues from the taxes, and that's the bottom line. We don't tell them what to put in their shirts. That's their job. We have our job.
Any rebuttal? You have one left. You don't have to take it.
No, I don't think I will.
You okay?
I think I've said my say.
All right. Next question. We had several questions on fracking.
Who would have guessed?
I almost don't know which one to pick, to be honest with you. They're all related though. So let's pick this one. What ideas do you have for stopping fracking in Longmont along the edges of the city? A specific thing, which is what I should say. Is it yours to start? Or is it Jeff? Did I get off by one? Off by one. Okay. Jeff?
Okay.
Yep.
So repeat the question.
What ideas do you have for stopping fracking in Longmont and along the edges of the city? So it's really two questions. Stopping fracking in general and at the edges of the city.
Well, stopping fracking means you're stopping drilling a hole in the ground. You don't frack until you actually have that hole, right? So right now, to stop it along the edges of the city, we have setbacks from residential areas, and those regulations have been affirmed by the Supreme Court. So you can't come within 750 feet of a house or a high occupancy building. You have to be further out than that. Now, there's a lot of arguments both ways on. Some people say it's too far. Some people say that's too close. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think what's more important is when you do the fracking operation, you limit the impact. The Supreme Court has said you can't stop the fracking activity, but we can have more say over where the drilling actually occurs. And I think that's really where we have to start. We are going to have to make sure that we have solid operator agreements with anybody that wants to develop oil and gas in our areas. They can reach their resources from a couple miles away, so there's really not a lot of reason to put it right next to a house. In order to do that, though, we need to make sure that we've talked to people. I think a lot of what's happened is that we've lost the ability to communicate between the development of oil and gas and the interest of the city. If we're going to actually stop fracking and drilling, we're going to have to go to the state. They're the ones that can change the law, and that means changing the legislature. That is one way to get it done. When we are developing, when oil and gas wants to develop within our boundaries of the city, right now we have one operator, and so far they've been very responsible and responsive to our request to minimize the impact to the drilling. There's already permits out by Union Reservoir. We're going to drill, and I don't think we can stop them from doing that, but I think we can require or negotiate requirements that will limit our impact on our overall community. Our roads, our air, our water. I said before I would never want to lease water for fracking. That's what, they'll have to get it somewhere else. When we do our operator agreements, we want to make sure that the impact of truck traffic is minimized. We have to think of all the options we can come up with, and it will take a negotiation with the operator. So I think if we continue to work with reasonable operators, we will get the best result. And if we want to fight with them, then we're going to end up with a different situation, and the state will step in and get in the way of everything that we're trying to do. And if that way we can have some control over our destiny and make sure that we don't have oil and gas drilled everywhere, but make sure that where they are is minimizing the impact of the city.
I think we have a basic difference in attitudes here. Once again, my opponent feels that the developer, different kind of developer this time, but it's the same principle. The developer has most of the power, and the city has almost none of the power, and that we have to accept what developers do as inevitable, whether it is in line with the will of the people or not, whether it's safe for the people or not, whether it makes the quality of life in our city worse or better. We still have to kowtow to business, and I just don't think that's right. And I think we've wasted a year now when we could have been adopting regulations, being creative, thinking about regulations that could have slowed these developers down, could have made it economically infeasible for them to drill, could have done a lot about it that we have not done, and we better get busy and do it. And let me tell you something else, and I think that this needs to go on at the state and maybe at the national level, although we've got a lot of power to recover at the national level before too much can be done. But what I think is that Colorado is sitting on so much natural gas and so much nasty oil that comes along with it, that we could power this country for a decade with what's under there. And it's out on the plains. And we only, and Longmont only has to object for now to the activity along the Front Range where we have a high density of population. Greeley didn't do that, and look what the quality of life is in Greeley now. I wouldn't go there and live. And you know, I have a friend who told me that it used to be a wonderful place to live, and he spent a long time there. Thought he wouldn't go back. And where did he go when he decided he didn't want to live in Greeley anymore? He went to Longmont. So here's the deal. We only have a few years to wait. We only have to delay for a certain amount of time. Generation of electricity via wind and via sun in Colorado is already cheaper, not on top of your roof solar, but in solar gardens, in utility scale solar farms, and on wind farms. That is cheaper generation already than you can get with natural gas or coal or any other fossil fuel that you can imagine. It's cheaper already, and the only thing that we lack is the infrastructure. You need a different kind of infrastructure to make that work, and a different kind of demand management to make that work. And we know how to build it, and you know, I know that we know how to build it because I did some of the work to figure out what we have to do. Have 7 patents in that area, and it's not so hard. We can do it, and we should be working on it now. I don't want to sound mad all the time because you know what? I'm really happy. I'm excited that we can do this. I'm excited that Colorado, in terms not just of oil and gas resources, but in terms of natural resources that are renewable, that are clean, that don't poison anybody. Colorado is one of the richest states in the Union. Not only that, because of our topology, we're even richer in natural storage capacity for energy than most other places. There's no reason that we should not be going as fast as we can, and the oil and gas industry is slowing it down only because they want to monetize every scrap of fossil fuel that is in there. And there's no reason they should have to do that. You know, that's the invisible hand of the market. You don't get to make a profit manufacturing buggy whips when it's more practical to drive cars than it is to keep horses in the city, you know? And so the buggy whip manufacturers lost. And our oil and gas people can just bloody well lose because we need to fix it so that they have to leave that stuff in the ground because it's more expensive to get out than it is to just give up. And we can do that. We can do that.
Time's up. Bubba?
Well, the question was really about what are you going to do about oil and gas near your city, not are we going to do renewable energy. So I think that we need to be answering questions, not pontificating about another question. That being said, you can do all the renewables you want. If we were 100% renewable, they'd still develop those resources because they're going to ship them overseas. That's what's going on right now. That's why they're doing so much natural gas. There's abundance of natural gas. They've permitted like, I don't know, 70 to 100 natural gas liquefaction plants to ship it overseas. We may be ahead of the curve on that. We have the resource. They're going to monetize it. We need to protect Longmont from that development, as well as bring in these renewable resources. Just to think that they won't do that is a pipe dream. Those buggy whips are going to continue to be manufactured. They're going to be shipped to another country that needs energy. And to think that it's not going to happen is, I don't know what planet you're on. But here we go again, is that got off topic.
It's not off topic. Is it my turn yet?
No.
Not yet.
Sorry. Keep talking, Jeff.
When we talk about protecting Longmont from oil and gas development, we do definitely need to change the state laws. The state is still going to step in anytime we push the boundaries or go past the limit. That is not something I really think that local control ought to be determining where anything might be sited. I think that we need to make sure that we are involved in the permitting process at the state level before the permits are issued. We need to issue our own permits. We need to issue our own requirements on the development so that we have protections for our water, our air, our citizens from noise, dust, all of the pollutants that come from this heavy industrial activity. I'm advocating for local control. We need to make sure that we are protecting our citizens. That's the role of the city. The state's gotten in the way. And I really think that we have an opportunity here to push at the state level and make sure that we elect different people, not from Boulder County. I love our representatives from Boulder County. But we need to be pushing our neighboring jurisdictions to change the makeup of the legislature so that we can actually get something done that helps people.
I cannot argue with any of that except that the passive attitude that we have to wait for something else. What we need to do is analyze the cost of extraction and find as many ways that we can to make it more expensive here, and that's how we protect our people. If we annex proactively, which may be an immediate step that the city council needs to take even before the election, then that's going to help. That'll give us more control. We need to figure out every single fee structure, every single control ordinance, every single monitoring, mapping ordinance that we can pass, and we need to get them all in place We need to get them in place fast, and if we have to contract with some specialists to write those ordinances for us so we can do it faster, well, let's do that. You know, we've contracted with specialists for other reasons. Yeah, and it is a different argument. But I'll tell you something else about those export plans. The United States is out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and a lot of other wealthy countries in the world are farther ahead in the race to have renewable energy than we are. So what's going to happen with that export market? I don't think it's going to last as long as you think it is, Jeff. And I hope it doesn't last as long as you think it's going to last, because that stuff is just plain safer in the ground, and that's where we should leave it. There's nothing more to it than that.
Well, you know, there's a lot, I think that we're agreeing on a lot of things. Safer in the ground is
safer in the ground is you.
But we're still driving our cars, we're still heating our houses. It doesn't require the amount of development that's occurring today to do that. The oil and gas industry doesn't see it that way. They want to maximize their bottom line, and that's what they're doing. I believe we're seeing the fallout of the pushback on the oil and gas industry now, with them moving into Boulder County, onto getting spacing units out there on open space. They're doing that to get a stake in the ground before development occurs. I'll say it again, they're putting a stake in the ground before development occurs. And while it's on open space, it's not supposed to be any development, we're going to have to see. I don't know how that's going to play out, because Longmont's ordinances say you can't develop on open space. So when that happens to Longmont, I think we're in for a fight, because that is something that we're not really allowing right now, and it's going to create issues. And I think that we have to be prepared to fight for our open space and our prevention from that. I call open space our big resource because it separates our cities from the next city. We know when we leave Longmont and enter the next jurisdiction. I really think that that's important, to have a unified city, a fiercely independent city, and that's what Longmont is. And if we keep looking forward, and we'll have to take the fight. And when this oil and gas development hits the open space, we're going to have to deal with it and do what we can today. But right now, there's no request to develop an open space in Longmont's open space.
Now we have a buzzer. Do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I
2 minutes,
do.
last one.
I do, and I'm really happy. You know, this is what debate is for, because Jeff and I are moving closer together as these rebuttals keep going around, and that's a real good thing. I don't think I've changed my position much, but it's good to come to an agreement. I think that we've got a school facility planned out there. We've got a park facility that's planned out there. And we can have big setbacks justified around a school facility. Big setbacks. And then there's this thing about pooling of mineral rights, which is if nobody says yes in the spacer, then they can't pool. You know, there's no forced pooling on the family land that is now owned by my brother. And that's because a whole quarter section was owned all by my family, and we stood our ground, and so there was nobody that would lease the mineral rights. And so our family legacy is intact and still in the family, and there are no wells on it. And you know what? When my family stood together and did that, we didn't understand forced pooling. We didn't understand what we were really risking. We just knew that we didn't want that stuff out of the ground because of us. And so we stood firm and we got it. And we need to educate the people and let them know how to exercise their power. Because we have a lot more power than the conservative city council people believe. It is not all in the hands of the market.
Okay, well, you know, there's a lot I won't argue with, but, and at the same time, if we're going to do something about this, we have to do it as a collective, as a citizenry. We have to get out beyond Longmont, because what's happening in Boulder County is not going to swing the needle at the legislature. We are in a situation where we can mobilize and get out into other areas of the state and get a different election going, get a different result at the legislature, change the laws that we need to have changed, stop forced pooling, and just stop the fact that if I want to do it, I can, and you can't stop me. I think that we need to have a bigger say in how oil and gas gets developed in the state. Even though those are private mineral rights, they are impacting our state and our communities, and we need to make sure that we get the required pound of flesh from them in order to make sure that we're not getting screwed over. We got to stop that.
All right, next question. So we got several questions that were asked in multiple ways about the same topic, and this is another one. What is your position on what we should do about answering the question, why is there still no passenger train connecting Longmont, Boulder, Denver, more than a decade after it was voted upon? And it is Marcia's turn.
All right, well, we all know why it happened. In 2008, the pretend strong economy exposed itself and fell to pieces, and it simultaneously began to be more expensive to build trains, and revenue from that was supposed to pay for the building of the train began to drop. And so RTD fell behind, and they couldn't do everything they had promised to do. And although the economy has recovered now, that behind is not going to go away magically and disappear. And other municipalities that have gotten RTD's attention and gotten their light rail in, for example, have faced reality and ponied up some extra funds that were raised by their chambers of commerce. You know, and Longmont could be doing something like that to make it happen. We already talked about what economic benefits could be gained by having a high-speed, high-volume, and high-frequency connection between Longmont and Denver. And I will believe that that is true until somebody shows me the numbers otherwise. But I think that we should find a way to put in a risk-free incentive for the companies in Denver that want to employ all us brainy, educated people that live in Longmont. We could make a pledge fund. We could tell them, oh, yeah, you pledge $100,000 and you pledge $100,000, and if RTD doesn't get off the dime, you don't owe a dime either. But when that train runs, then after you've got the economic advantage that's available for it, then you can pay up, but it's going to be a good investment for you. That's just one example of a kind of creative solution that could be done. I'm not in the know yet. I'm not in power. I don't know whether that's a practical solution, but it is a solution, and it's a solution that acknowledges the reality of things, which is that we cannot force RTD at gunpoint to do this. We can force them to maybe do other things. We can say, well, now wait a minute, you've got an awful lot of our tax money, and we need more than a bench and a clock tower, right? Which is what they're trying to say, that we can have in exchange for all the tax money that they've collected from Longmont and spent on other municipalities. You know, maybe we could get some help from them in clearing up this congestion problem that we have on the south side of Longmont, here in Ward 2. Because what's one of the big things that causes that congestion problem? You know, it's those big, fat, slow, stinky, clumsy buses that go up and down Ken Pratt Boulevard. They get in the left lane, they stop, and it takes them forever to get moving again because they're big, fat, stinky, clumsy buses. Well, you know what? If RTD put a pilot program in Longmont with some smaller, faster, less clumsy, more agile electric buses that would not create as much traffic congestion as the great big ugly ones do. You know, that's one thing that we could get them to try and work on with us. You know, after all, we'd have had more lateral public transportation if we'd have built that station that they promised us to be the terminus of the commuter rail. So they owe us some lateral transportation already, and we could use that. We can use our leverage with them to get that fixed in the short term, while we find ways to argue about the commuter train. But that's our commuter train, and we need it as soon as we can get it.
Well, we were sold a bill of goods. It's the bottom line. And then, after we sold that bill of goods, they didn't build it the way they said they were going to. Original plans were they were going to build a backbone from Longmont to Union Station and then spur out to the sides from that. Instead, they got distracted down in the south part of Denver and in Denver proper, and said, well, you know, let's build this, let's build this. They were like spinning around in their head. They were poorly managed. They did not promise to deliver as they proposed. That being said, I was at the last Community Solutions meeting. We're not getting rail in 2040. That was the message. That was word for word. I took him to task on that. He said, you realize that tax money coming to you has been coming to you for a long time, and we have nothing. We don't even have decent bus service. Marcia calls it big, fat, clunky, spewing. I agree, but we don't even have bus service. We could use 4 or 5 more lines in Longmont, and that would definitely help overall. Now, BRT study going on right now to connect us to the Flatiron Flyer and US 36. The study's going underway. RTD caught so much flack that they pulled that back in from 2024 to 2022 again, where it was originally slated to be built. So I think that we have gotten some attention by waving our arms and stomping our feet. Still not enough money to get us our rail, unfortunately. Bus service would be the first step towards building out our mass transit. There was a recent article I read too that an electric bus just surpassed 300 miles on one charge. Now that makes it viable to use it for a route inside a city, and that's where I believe it will go that way, because overall costs are going to be lower. You don't have to change the oil; you just have to charge them up. You don't have to change. You know, you still have tires and belts and things like that, but think about the maintenance cost on a diesel engine versus an electric motor. That is definitely going to lower their costs overall. There is one thing that I think RTD needs to do today that they're not doing. That's collect fare boxes, revenues. You can jump on a train and not pay. Every time someone steps on light rail in Denver, it's $11 subsidy. Think about it. Even though that they put money into the project, we in Longmont are subsidizing that rider at $11 a ride. That's how RTD is being run. Does that sound like a sound business model to anybody in the room? Doesn't to me. We're paying for a transportation system we're not getting any real benefit of. The bus station that RTD proposed, I was in a meeting with David Genova and Henry Stompenkamp. They were proposing that parking lot with a clock tower and no bathrooms, right? That was a joke. That was a slap in the face. That was an insult to Longmont. I looked over at David Genova and I said, that's not going to work for Longmont. We will have a parking structure and a transit-oriented development. We will have what everybody else in the region has. We are the end of the line. It should be recognizable as part of an RTD project, not just some parking lot with a bathroom that doesn't work for anybody but the drivers. They were going to take our retail or our potential commercial property along Main Street away from us. That property generates tax revenue. A parking lot that's owned by RTD generates zero tax revenue. I looked over at our city manager and I said, look, do you think we can find a partner to work with us to develop a parking structure and a TOD so that we actually get something for our money in the long run? They have $17 million to put into that project. We have about a year's worth of work on the St. Vrain to take them out of the floodplain. We're working on IGAs. We have a site plan developed. That is what we're going to get from RTD, regardless of what they think we should have.
I don't disagree with some of the things that Jeff said, and I probably would have said some of the same things if I'd been in his chair at that time, but I wasn't. But there's one thing I want to clarify. Electric buses are going to be fine for our east-west congestion problems, and we both think that those are a possible solution for that, although knowing where we're going to need more roads is also a solution that we should be thinking about, knowing in advance before we approve the development. I said that earlier. But buses are not a solution for north-south transportation between Denver, Boulder, and Longmont. And let me tell you why. It's not, we don't work the same way that we worked in 2000 or 2004 or 2005. The people who live in Longmont don't want to make Longmont into a bedroom community, and they want to ride a big stinky bus all the way down into Denver at 7 o'clock in the morning and ride another one back at 5:30 in the afternoon and not get home until almost 8. That's not the way modern commuting works. What we need is transportation that will allow people who live in Longmont to stay in Longmont and work for those Denver companies, and when they need to be present in the Denver office, be able to hop on a commuter rail and be there in 25 or 30 minutes so that it doesn't blow their workday out of the water. That's the kind of, when I say high volume, high speed, high frequency commuter rail, that's what I'm talking about. What we need is something that is going to enable the workplace of the future, not the workplace of the 1980s in New York State. Right? We need a modern commuter rail system, and we should insist on it.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that working remotely is kind of the new the new norm almost, I think. Back in the day, I couldn't do that myself particularly because I worked in a manufacturing facility where we made parts. But there are a lot of, as the economy changed over time, I think we've seen that there is a definite advantage to being able to work out of your home, especially with if you have high-speed internet. You have Nextlight, for example, you're able to do all kinds of things you couldn't do before. Because of this upload speeds, you can now do a lot of videography, you can do a lot of production that could be done remotely. You're still going to need to get to Denver, like Marcia mentioned. There's still going to be a lot of jobs that are going to change into that remote activity. Is that going to change the need for what the kind of transportation we need? Maybe we need the vacuum tube scenario where we jump in a mail tube and they get shot to Denver on a cushion of air. That might be where we end up in 50 years, but today we don't know that, and we're dealing with what we have today. I see Councilmember Finley left, but she rides the express bus almost daily. And she's able to make council meetings at special sessions at 5:30. So I know that it's not very frequent. That's really the big issue with that. I think they run 2 buses in the morning, 2 buses at night, and it's not really servicing us very well. And that's another slap in the face for Longmont with RTD. You can ride the Flex from Longmont to Fort Collins and back for $2.50. We bought up the fare box within Longmont, $2.40 per ride. So it's like, where's the equity in that? And I say go back to collecting fare box, and you might have more revenue. You can get on a bus, they may or may not check it. We need to be collecting that revenue from RTD too. Because when they've come to council and said we need to do this, we need to said, well, what's your ridership? We don't know. So how do you know what to charge us for fare box? Well, we just figured this is fair. Well, you know what? That's another example of poor management on RTD's part. You cannot ride the rail in Washington, D.C. without purchasing a ticket. RTD, you can jump on the light rail downtown, and if you don't get caught, you don't pay. That's wrong. And that's impacting their revenues as well. So it's mismanagement.
So, do you have a rebuttal? One thing, can you guys speak up because we're getting a lot of noise outside now? So.
Yeah. I have a question. Am I allowed to ask Jeff a question?
That wasn't really part of this, no.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask
You guys
it.
agreed to the rules beforehand. So.
I'll ask it rhetorically then. About that business about making sure that everybody pays what they owe. Does that mean that we're not going to have free in-city transportation for our seniors anymore? Are we going to make them start paying again? Because, you know, I have a real good friend that wouldn't go anywhere, couldn't go anywhere if she had to pay fare. So I kind of like that Longmont is subsidizing some rides on RTD, you know, just around the city. I like that. I don't want that to go away because I care about the people who live here, and they need a ride. They need a ride.
Sure. I mean, I think that I fully support buying up the fare box. There's a couple reasons. One of them is that we are providing a service that a lot of people depend on, and if the fare in Longmont is exorbitant for what you get. If we didn't buy up the fare box in Longmont, we may not even have 2 bus routes. Think about it. We have substandard service because we subsidize it. We subsidize it with general fund dollars, we subsidize it with sales tax dollars. we are doing this because I'm supporting it because I'm concerned that if we don't do this, we will have zero service. And where will that lead us? It's very important for us to continue to make sure we can provide transit within Longmont, and I will continue to support buying up that fare box.
You done? All right. Moving on to cannabis.
Handing out samples. Here we go.
You guys have things you want to ask. So, what is your position on allowing recreational cannabis and cannabis grows inside Longmont city limits? And it is Jeff's turn.
All right, well, obviously I have a track record on this now than after Tuesday, right? I believe if we're going to have it, we should be collecting a tax. And I proposed a motion on Tuesday night to make the legalization dependent on the sales tax passing. That failed miserably because I guess people are so sure that we're going to pass that sin tax that we're going to get the revenue and we're going to get pot shops. Well, what if the bond fails? It only had a 56% support in the last polling we did in 2016. 56% on a ballot issue is not very strong. Normally, if you don't see 62 or 63%, it's not a sure thing. So I think it's a 50-50 at best whether that tax will pass. And I think if we are depending on the fact that it's a sin tax to make it pass, then I think we might be fooling ourselves. I voted no on allowing the shops based on that alone. Without the revenue, we're going to start to see impacts that are bigger than we're already experiencing. Even with 2 outlets on our borders, we're feeling some impact. If we add 4 more, we're still going to, it's going to just, that requirement for more public safety and more licensing and more inspection and more fire services for inspections is going to increase, and we're not going to have a source of revenue to cover that. And that's really the main reason why I voted against it. And if we, I mean, the writing's on the wall, it's going to pass, but it's not the way I'd like to see it pass. I'd like to see it pass with a tax associated with it.
Well, I think what's legal in Colorado ought to be legal in Longmont. And although I think there is a danger that that tax will pass, it's not the worst thing in the world. We'll still have a lot of revenue that people are paying natural sales tax on that we don't have revenue now. And I think we need to get going and go forward on that. But I have something else to say about how that ordinance came down. After I announced that I was running for Jeff's seat, I started coming to city council meetings as long as I could, as often as I could. And I was there the night when our council members, who had not been having the best track record of getting along with each other up to that point, took up this issue. And they worked so far into the night that I was not sure I could stay till the end of it. But they were serious. They worked, they talked to each other, they did a good job. They talked about all the impacts of different placements of licensing for shops that could matter, where they'd be placed, and how we would avoid the danger of having a row of pot shops that like got out on Colfax or someplace, They worked hard. And that is what is really inspiring about local government. That when it is the city doing its thing, when we're working our best for the benefit of this municipality, then it is a really inspiring thing to see, even if it's 11:30 at night. And you know, you guys can go to my website and read the blog post that I wrote about that, because I was really inspired by that session that night, and I was really glad I sat through it. So all the members of City Council that are in here now, do that. That was a great job, and I'm proud of you for getting that right.
Well, thank you, Marshall.
You're welcome.
You've hit on one of the things that keeps me coming back to council, is that when we do get something done, it feels really good, and we know that we have accomplished something. There's bound to be times when we don't get along. It's just the nature of people. But when we brought this all together, we did work together. We did have, there was very little consternation. There's common agreement on almost everything, on how we should have for setbacks. Do we want it on Main Street? Do we want it here? What's the setbacks from schools? It was right away we went to 1,000 feet. You know, that was never in question, because I know every council member cares about how this could potentially impact our elementary and our middle schools and our senior highs. We already have issues in those schools because of legalization. We don't need to have it to where they could take a lunch break and go have someone buy popcorn, right? 1,000 feet is a distance far enough that they might still do it. I don't know. Seems like the youth are very resourceful. So I think that keeping it out of Longmont is really not my goal. I think my goal was to make sure we collect an additional tax on it. When we end up, at the end of the day, the staff was very diligent in going out to other communities, identifying issues they found when they did their ordinances, put together a package of one of the longest ordinances I've ever seen. It's 49 pages or something like that. There's so much detail in there that it's going to take the attorneys a while to figure it out. So I think that when we talk about council accomplishing things, it's what keeps me coming back to council. It's not always that way. People ask me how I like being on council. I said most of the time. And that's because we really, as a council, we've done a much better job than previous councils have of getting along and getting things done. We don't always agree. That's bound to happen. Most of the time, we're unanimous in our votes. That just tells me that we're not that far apart on most of the issues. The contentious issues is where we tend to see some separation in our views, and that's natural, and I think that's to be expected.
Good. All right. So we've actually been getting a bunch of Facebook questions, and we had some of this already. Do you believe city officials and police should use their resources to help and collaborate with ICE? Why or why not? It is Marcia's turn.
Hey, no, I don't. There are plenty good reasons for it. You know, there are all those reasons that we know that are practical reasons, right? People won't call the police if they're afraid they're going to get deported for it. You know? And those are good reasons, and we should pay attention to those. We should pay attention to our police force when when they tell us those reasons. But that's not the reason I oppose it. The reason that I oppose it is because these are our people. They live here. They work with us. They go to school with us. They belong in Longmont. And that matters to me because it would not be the same city if those people were not here, if they were separated from their children and we had to find places for those children to grow up. And I know there are a lot of people here in Longmont now that are working against that contingency right now. But I don't want to see it happen. I want the DREAM Act to pass. And I think that everybody here needs to know that they need to keep calling, because Longmont can protect the people who live here, and they can keep treating them like they are part of our community, because they are. But we cannot stop what's happening at the national level by ourselves. And so we have to be activists if we value and cherish this community. We have to be activists at the federal level and get it done. There's a story that I can tell about that. How many minutes do I have? 2.5. I can get it in. So you know Cory Gardner lives in Yuma. That's his hometown. And it came to me through the grapevine that an organization I belong to built in the Eastern Plains, that they had a girls' club out there that usually marches every year in the state fair or the county fair parade. There we go, the county fair parade. The Las Estrellas march there every year. But they had an idea this year that they wanted to make that a demonstration for DACA, because the theme of the fair was it's not just cows and plows. And they thought that that was a good opportunity to remind everybody who went to that fair, and especially Cory Gardner, who takes care of the cows, who's behind the plows, who's digging up the sugar beets. You know, it's immigrants. And not all of them have documents, and not all of those girls that marched in that parade have documents. And they planned that event without using Facebook, without using any social media, barely using email, but just using that network of activists that had been built, indivisibles and county Democratic leaders, you know, all different people. And they reached us and they said, that man's sitting back there, and he filmed it. And On Hill's organization and related ones sent extra activists, 2 buses full of them, to make the demonstration bigger. And that was right under Cory Gardner's nose. And it was a big success, and you can't open a Facebook page without seeing those videos now. And that's the kind of activism that we have to do to protect the undocumented members of our community.
Yeah.
Well, I also agree that we should not cooperate with ICE. The only time that we would do that is if they had a court order. We're not, it's just wrong to hand people over without the correct legal documents, which require a reason to detain somebody, not just because the color of their skin or their accent or their language. It's wrong. When we talk about Longmont, we talk about a heritage of Hispanic cooperation. We had a falling out, I can't remember the year, where there was a police shooting, and the town blew up. And that's really what we're faced with. If we haven't had a Ferguson here since that time. And it's time for us to make sure that we are supporting everybody in our community, because everybody contributes to our community. And the Hispanic community is a solid base that we can depend on to support everything we do in Longmont. And if we don't take care of them, we don't have to take care of them, they take care of themselves. But I want to make sure we cooperate even more. We have a serious lack of participation from that community on our boards and commissions. We have a serious lack of involvement in even like our Chamber of Commerce. They have their own Chamber of Commerce, which is great. They have a great Chamber of Commerce. They have a great leader in that over there. And they're based out of Longmont. So it tells me that Longmont is the place that in Boulder County for Latinos to be supported. We need to support them, and we need to make sure that we are cooperating to the fullest extent of the law, but at the same time, what's happened at the federal government is deplorable. We don't have to let that happen to Longmont. We need to push back on that. We need to support all of our community and make sure that we can have reaching for the word. We need to make sure that everybody gets along and that we like each other. I mean, I would hate to think how I would feel if I were in any other shoes. I don't know if I could do it. They're extremely brave. They're extremely loyal. They're extremely loyal to each other and to our community. They are a part of the foundation that we're built on in Longmont as a whole. It's a heritage that goes back generations. We cannot let that slip away. That will tear our community apart. We need to work at this, though. It's not going to happen unless we commit to it. We have to make sure that we're working towards that end, and I'm one that wanting to do that. I've reached out to Jose Beteta and asked him to help me find people to join boards and commissions as a first step to get towards into city leadership, because they're very much underrepresented in all aspects of our city leadership. And I would like to see that changed.
It's not a rebuttal, but the word you're looking for, Jeff, is solidarity.
All right.
All right, it's about 3 minutes to 9 o'clock, and these guys are averaging about 21 minutes per question. And I still have a bunch of questions from people that came in. I've also been asked if we would take questions from the audience. And it's kind of up to them, but also up to you guys. Brian's going, no. So I think what we're going to go ahead and do, I think we covered most of the main things. We're going to go ahead and end this. There's going to be another debate, the 3rd of October? 2nd of October? Monday. I'm sorry. Among all the candidates, and then after that, you said there's another one.
There's one on the 4th. There's a lot of
There's a lot of debates.
Monday,
There'll be plenty of opportunities for everybody to ask additional questions, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I assume you guys are going to hang around a little bit.
Are we going to have closing statements?
So
I was fond of mine.
that's right. We do have closing statements. We're just running out of time here. So let's go ahead and take 6 more minutes, finish the closing statements, and we'll only be over 2 minutes then. Go ahead.
Who's first?
It actually doesn't matter. Do you want to go?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, by now, By now, I hope you know me. The only thing I hope you have not concluded that I'm a really bad person all the time. Because, you know,
I'm mad too. And I'm not going to take it
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, that's the thing, you know. These are questions that make me mad, and I get mad about these issues, and that's not really who I am most of the time. I'm passionate about a lot of things, but mostly I'm passionate because I love this town, and I want it to become better, to become the best place it can be, and I want all of us to get along and benefit from it. I want solidarity. So I hope my answers have told you what I believe in and why I'm running for public office when I could be skimming stones on a mountain lake. But just in case, I'm going to tell you once more. I believe in public service. What we do for one another is the most meaningful thing that we do. The most meaningful thing that we do. And since I gained the power to determine what I did and where I went, I have bent the arc of my career toward public service. I moved from digital storage, which, you know, isn't very public service-y, honestly, to healthcare process improvement, which is, to clean technology, because we all have to do what we do best. I chose to work where my work would do the most good. Now I don't have to work for profit anymore. I will be an effective public servant. In each phase of my career, I hit the ground running. I learned fast and grew from being a strong contributor to a thought leader in a really short time. 3 times I chose to work where my work would do the most good. I believe in community. Longmont is a strong community. We care about one another and we accept one another. We're stronger for our diversity. When I speak with you, when I go door to door, you reinforce my faith in the value of our community. If you work here, you should be able to live here. Our differences enrich us. We should all benefit from economic growth. We should all benefit. Those who profit from building here should enrich the city as well as themselves. This is where we live together. This is where we live together. So I'd like it if you would elect me to City Council. I will work hard for you. I will work hard with you. And I want your vote.
Well, my engineering background has given me a way to look at information and distill it down into an end point where we have a decision that makes sense. And I have the experience that shows that I'm really the best candidate for your support. I'm ready to hit the ground running, to move our city forward. My moderate positions on council will give me a clear-headed decision-making process that's not clouded by partisanship. I'm here to serve all the residents of Longmont. Most of the time, solutions require a certain amount of pragmatism, and that means looking at all the sides of the matter fairly. It also means we have to understand what is the real legal, procedural, financial, and practical constraints we work with when we deal with government. Things are just not always black and white, and that's where we get into the tough decisions I make on council. Ingrid could tell you that there are times I spend days agonizing over issues because there's no right answer, and no matter what answer you make, you're going to make somebody mad. That is a serious responsibility too, though, is those policies last generations. What we don't need to do is make sure that what we don't need to do is deal with state and federal issues. We need to deal with what's happening at home. Those state and federal issues influence where we take our policies and what we have to deal with, but that doesn't mean that we have to let them guide our own destiny. For me, it's not easy to be pragmatic and moderate. People on both sides get mad at you. We have to be good stewards of Longmont's resources. It would be irresponsible to forgo that responsibility of improving our infrastructure and investment in the future so that we can get to where we got to today because of that type of investment. It's irresponsible to not plan for future needs such as water, land use, energy, and housing. It's irresponsible to allow oil and gas development in our residential areas. It's irresponsible to allow water to be used for fracking. It's irresponsible not to fund public safety. I could go on, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm here to serve Longmont. What happens outside of Longmont, we need to know about. We need to influence our state legislatures. The council does take positions on legislation, and we do that as a body. We can also do that as individuals. We need to make sure we separate the two so that when we're in front of the microphone, we are clearly representing Longmont if that's the decision of council, but if it's not the decision of council, we need to make sure we're representing ourselves.
All right, I want to thank all of you for coming, and I'm assuming you guys will hang around a little bit.
I have a quick announcement. On next Wednesday from 8:30 to 9:30 on KGNU, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins, 88.5 FM, KGNU.org. The mayoral debates will be broadcast. That's KGNU Radio. So if you want to listen to the mayoral debates, that'll be 8:30 to 9:30 next Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you, guys.